Apparently now I have to clarify that I want to record on my computer instead of the cloud. So, for those of you listening in, this is episode 17 of Man Buns and Jesus. I am one of your hosts. I guess we call ourselves hosts. That feels too professional for us.
Yeah.
But I'm Josh Laborious. I'm a pastor in Eastvale, California, and that over there is my co-host, or whatever we're calling ourselves, Benjamin Olschlager, pastor of it's like Faith or Child of God, or did I get Faith?
No,
Is that right?
no. It's Good Shepherd. I was trying to I was gonna
It's one of the seven
parade.
generic Lutheran church names.
Yeah, that's not a saint. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So Good
Yeah.
Shepherd in the farthest reaches of the cold, dark north.
We're in Lake Orion, Michigan. Yeah.
What are we talking about today, Ben?
So today, because I wanted to talk about something lighthearted, um, I decided that we're gonna talk about stuff in churches that makes us cringe. Um, because there are a lot of people who do a lot of well-meaning things in churches that make pastors and other church professionals cringe. Um,
And other church members, right?
and other church members, yes. Um, and today just felt like a good day to just vent a little bit, you know. Um, None of this is necessarily relevant to the situation that either one of us is in right now. It's just life experiences that we've seen along the way that we see and cringe. So, um, Josh, do you want me to go first since this is my topic, or do you have one right off the top of your
I'm
head that
I'm
you want
ready
to
to
start with?
go. I think one of and no, I want to start off kidding. Not I had a heavier one. No, we're not gonna start there. We're not gonna go there. We'll get there later.
Okay.
Something that makes me
Okay.
cringe is just the happy clappy I'm gonna pretend the whole world is sunshine and rainbows, and they come in and they're always the peppy equivalent of a Christian. That just makes me cringe because I think the core of it is probably I have a general awareness that no one's life is actually that upbeat. So this is the problem I have with a lot of Christian radio. This case in point, Christian radio DJs. I cannot listen to Christian
Yeah.
radio stations because of the
Yep.
DJs, because they're always like, this is everything's so great and we're so happy and everything's going great, and I'm like, probably not. You're right. We have an understanding as Christians that while we're in the world, we're gonna suffer, and the world is broken by sin. And to pretend that it's not, I think, is inauthentic, and it makes me uncomfortable. That's why I listen to alternative radio, where all of the hosts are probably clinically depressed.
It is a better reflection on the world. Uh, this is a complete aside, but it's funny that you mentioned that because I grew up. We're growing up in the Twin Cities. There's this radio station there. I don't think it exists anymore. But they had it was called Metal Mondays, and it was a 2-hour block on Monday nights of just Christian hardcore metal. Um, and because metalheads are all the same, regardless of whether they're Christian or not, they were much more blunt and to the point than your average Christian radio host, and it was pretty phenomenal. um, yeah. Anyway, Josh, that is absolutely something that makes me cringe too. Specifically, the Christian radio host side of that. You
And
just
if you're listening to this
preaching
and
to
you're
the
a Christian
choir here,
radio
my
host,
friend.
I don't have anything against you, but maybe be a little more in touch with reality in your in your profession, right? Acknowledge that
Yeah,
sometimes life just sucks and there's not really it's just that's the reality of the situation.
yeah. I think, Josh, my first thing that makes me cringe um, is church closets. Um, you know exactly where I'm going with this, don't you?
I
Um,
know a couple directions that you should go with this.
I mean, so the first and foremost, there is an old school joke in the church that if there is empty space in the church is either closed or new. Because as soon as you have empty space in a church, it gets filled. Um, I spent 2 hours ish with a group of about 12 guys 2 weeks ago, clearing out old books and materials from a couple different places around the church. My secretary wandered into one of the two spaces we'd been working in a couple days later and went, still looks about the same. Um, which speaks to the level of just
The volume
stuff.
of crap.
Yeah. Um, some of it's useful stuff. A lot of it is just old books and stuff that we probably need to get rid of. But yeah,
Well, it's
Bro,
almost like collectively churches they come together and they develop a hoarding problem.
yes,
Right,
it's
because the argument
absolutely
with a
true.
lot of hoarding is I can't throw it away. What if I need it one day? And
Yes.
it's like
Yep.
for
Mhm.
some things, that's a fair right. If you have say you replace your communion set, that old one was probably pretty expensive. So if someone were to say, "Well, what if we need it one day?" That's one instance where I'd say, you know what, that's fair because this thing probably costs a few $100s, and say we have a Christmas service or something and we need more communion than we normally do. Fair, right? But like if it's a 15-cent devotional booklet that has dates in it for Advent 2001, right? We're probably never going to need that. And if in worst case scenario, we reorder the 15-cent booklet, right?
My personal favorite thing that we found, the church had a school that closed a few years back. We found a copy of an instructional book teaching the basics of Microsoft Office 2004.
Yeah. So this is something
And
that I think you could make a fairly serious living going into churches and installing, not in like a computer term, just like putting into place systems to keep this down. Because like the cringe reason is right, it looks like crap, right? If some
Mhm.
visitor comes by and they're like, oh, I could you give me a catechism or whatever they're asking for, and you're like, oh sure, let me just go in the book closet and get you one, and they see in the book closet that the church is just barely covering up this hot mess. It
Mhm.
doesn't reflect super well on you, right? One of the
Mhm.
things that there's a really good book called No Man Left Behind, and it's kind of a it's at its core, it's a book that suggests like here are good ways to do men's ministry. But one really profound point they make is that a lot of churches are decorated by chicks and they look like it, right? There's flowers everywhere. There's like it's all very, for lack of a better way to put it, it's all very soft, right? In the parlance of Letterkenny, right? It's 10 ply, and if you're a dude and you walk into that, it doesn't, whether it's conscious or not, it doesn't look like this is my kind of place, right? And I think that's why you find places that are a little more intentional in decorating more neutrally or even more slanted for men. You have a lot more clean lines, you have a lot more neutral colors, stuff like that. Um, it helps hold guys better. And that seems like a really stupid,
Mhm.
shallow thing, but at the same breath, like that's a pretty easy way to improve your retention. All of this circling back to your cringe point, right? The way your church looks matters, and it matters a lot more
Mhm.
than we would think it should. But
Mhm.
if your church is a disorganized mess, that's a barrier for people. Like
Mhm.
and I can so I just finished cleaning up our kitchen and stuff. I can tell you if our kitchen's a mess and there's just there's chaos, the dishwasher hasn't been loaded. My desire to walk into that kitchen and make dinner goes from an average on an average day probably from about an 80% down to like a 30%, right? And like pastors
That
out
might
there,
be
if you're
high
any of
for
our
me.
friends and your pastors out there, if your office is chaos, and I hope there aren't too many, but people wired like me are not going to want to go visit you in your office because it
Mhm.
will bother us that your office is a hot mess. And now I'm having flashbacks to that professor I had to help with IT. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, we're not going to go there. Um,
Stacks of paper this high on all parts of his giant desk from
yeah.
20 years ago.
Mhm. Mhm. Josh, what's your next church cringe?
Oh, my next church cringe. Um, I think it's gotta be. Oh, I might get in trouble for this one. Dancing and clapping in church. Okay,
You
not
better
and
explain your. You better come and you better come correct.
okay. So here's. I told you I might get in trouble for this one. Okay, so what I'm not talking about is if it is a song that has like a driving beat and it really like lends itself to clapping, the worship leader then gets everybody going. That no cringe, right? That's you're worshiping just like with your voice, you're becoming an instrument on some level. You're part of the corporate worship experience. I have no problem with that. At the same time, no problem with liturgical dance. I think is how we have a dance troupe. We have a wonderful lady in our congregation. She's in charge of a dance studio, and every once in a while they come in and they do a performance. Like I can't. It was either the week before or it was Christmas Eve. They came in and they had a Christmas performance, and it told the Christmas story really really well. It was very cool. Again, not cringe. What I'm talking about is when one person decides they're gonna clap. And I think what bothers me most is very frequently that person is off beat. No, that sounds terrible, and you look weird, and and for a lot of other people, they're praying that you stop. Like it's very distracting to have one person clapping slightly offbeat or clapping by themselves or doing their little potty dance. Um, like if you're the only one in the room dancing or whatever you call it, um, it's cringy, right? Like be a sheep, be a
I'm
sheep.
actually going to disagree with you here. I'm gonna disagree with you here. I think if you're the only one getting into the music,
Okay, so if
you are
someone is
sincerely
like
getting into.
doing this in the back of the church, that's not distracting for you? For those of you who are listening,
No,
you might want
absolutely
to check out the
not.
video because I just did something ridiculous on it. Like that isn't. Stop it. Be a conformist at
My
least a
my
little
thing,
bit.
it I can understand the clapping. If you're the only one in the room clapping, that can be distracting for sure. But if you are the one person who's like, if you just need to move with music, if that is you, like you can't physically sit still listening to music, which was me when I was younger, just go sit in the back. Like, be in a place where you aren't necessarily going to draw people's attention and go nuts. That's fine. Do that. Um, I'm happy to have people do that. Like, it's no different than a kid running around grabbing different crayons to color on a page while they're listening to the sermon in their pew. Like, to me, it's kind of like it's the same level of distraction, but on some level,
Well,
the
see,
rest of us in the congregation have to deal with that.
I guess I want to draw a line between, because like I get it, right? But freaking white boy shuffle up in there. Don't like you're not breaking down. You're not Soldier Boy, okay? If both of those reference missed for you, I don't know what demographic you're a part of because I just hit. I learned the white boy shuffle from some old people, and Soldier Boy is from slightly less old people. And
You can throw the Macarena in there, and then you get basically
sure,
everybody, because
like
anybody
don't
that's been to a wedding has probably danced the Macarena.
yeah. I guess my line is: are you doing it because call it nervous energy? I guess because like you move with music. I get that. Like I'll be tapping my foot, or I'll maybe I'll be bouncing my leg or something, right? I'm a fidgety person. Even now, like the reason I'm sitting so much further back is because now my camera is attached to the desk and I fidget, and if I'm touching the desk, the camera's gonna shake. Okay. I get it. But there's a line where like that kind of thing going on becomes, hey, look at me, look at how into worship I'm getting, which I think is because I've met people who
Mm,
it's performative for them. And I'm like,
mhm,
it's not about you, calm down, right? So I think that's my line, which is a contextual line, right? Because some people have even more fidgety energy than I do, and their movements are gonna be more exaggerated because they have all this energy going on. But a lot of people I see do this, I know them, and I'm like, you don't have nervous energy, you have no problem sitting still, but you want everybody to see how into the music you're getting. And I guess that's the cringy part for me, is because I know some of these people who do it for attention,
mhm,
and maybe that's
mhm.
what bothers me. This turning, I don't know if this is turning into a psychoanalysis counseling session, but
I mean,
anyway.
I think it is a little bit, but it's good. We need to process this, Josh. We need to get this out of you.
So does that mean I can go back and cut out the
uh,
section of video where I danced on camera?
no, that's got to stay. That's got to be on record. Um, and if somebody has the skills that's watching this, please gift that so that we can use that in future. Um,
I
I want to
don't know,
build
what's
on this
another
a little
cringy
bit.
thing
I
you
think
have,
something.
Ben?
Well, no, I was gonna build on yours, because I do think that there are times where like there's like a level of dancing or clapping that's really cringy, and it's like, for me, it's when, especially happens in contemporary settings, where a worship leader will try and get a congregation that is just not into it to clap, and like, or move and get excited. Like, you kind of, on some level, have to feel your audience as a musician. um and if you're standing there and your entire, like, week after week after week, the congregation just doesn't seem super into the music that you're choosing, pick different music. Don't try and force them to get into music that, like,
Just
they
because
don't want
you
to.
really like
I
it or whatever.
Yeah, I've been to a handful of churches where, like, the music selection is stale, it feels old, it feels cheesy. The worship leaders are often talented musicians. Sometimes their hands are tied by pastor. I don't know the situation there, but like, I just feel like there's oftentimes a better music selection than what's there, and it's going to be a lot easier to get people to sing something they're actually comfortable with than trying to force them to get into something that they don't like.
Yeah. So, kind of spinning off that even more, I think it's just cringy in general when churches are caught 20 years in the past. Right? So there's this distinction. Our theology, our doctrine does not change. We hold on to that, right? We hold on to the truths of scripture and what we teach and the content. But how we portray that, how we show that to people
Mhm.
is contextualized, right? It's appropriate to the setting you're in. And don't get stuck 20 years ago, right? Okay. An example, silly bands, for the if anyone, if you remember, if you don't, that's fine. But silly bands used to be these things. They were like shaped rubber bands, and it was a thing. Kid, I think it was like a big middle school thing. Like you'd have like an arm full of silly bands, and if a church today gave those out, you'd be out of touch, right? They're not cool anymore. Paracord bracelets. There was a time where they were like a fad thing. I recognize they're a practical thing, especially if you hiking and camping, but they were a fad thing. People like to wear them. They're not cool anymore. So if
Mhm.
you were giving them out as like a cool thing, a cool church thing, they're not cool anymore. And I think the same thing applies to music, right? And here's an instance. I'm so thankful I'm not a worship leader because I don't have to do this. Listen to Christian radio. If they don't play the song anymore, that means it has become out of date. Okay, that's an easy metric for you. Obviously there are exceptions and no one is opposed to an occasional throwback, right? Except for Shine Jesus Shine. Joel, if you're listening to this, no. No, no, no.
Oh.
Anyway,
And if Chuck, for any reason you are listening to this, I'm gonna second that motion. Um,
but like keep the music current. Keep and I recognize you can't do new songs every week. That's not practical, that's not helpful because people can't learn them. But if you've gone if at no point you're not introducing a new song at some point you're not trying to work it in, like you're falling behind because the trends in music change, the trends in people's taste change. um, So like if you're consistently playing songs that they don't ever play on Christian radio anymore because they're, 20, 30 years old, you're becoming outdated in the contemporary worship setting. Okay, I think hymns are a different game, right? Because they've gone from cool to outdated to classic, right? That's putting the best construction on it, right? It's a 70-year-old car that maybe when it came out it was cool and it wasn't for a while, but now it's like there's a collector's whatever to it. That's what hymns are. They're collectibles. Am
I'm
I
gonna
gonna get
agree
hate
and
mail for
disagree with
that?
you on this.
Huh?
No, no, I'm gonna agree and disagree with you on this though. So in high school, I had a 1998 Volvo V70 station wagon that I drove as my daily driver. Thing was it was an absolute lemon, an absolute piece of junk. By the time my parents finally scrapped that car, it was only like 2 years away from being uh no, maybe not two. It was not that far away from being able to apply for collector's plates for it. Um
And you're
there's
thinking,
some
why would
beauty in
anyone
the eye
ever
of the
collect this
beholder
piece
that
of
goes,
crap?
yeah, absolutely. There's some beauty in the eye of the beholder there. And yes, hymns are very much in their own ball game. Um, but I think going to the music side of things, like I almost feel like if they're playing it on Christian radio, don't play it because people are getting those songs. Like if you are a solid listener of Christian radio, you are probably sick of every song that they play
Okay, that's fair. Well, so here's a radio
because it's like the
in.
same 20 song on loops.
Right. So here's an insight from someone who was in the radio. I worked at a radio station for 4 years, and we were a top 40 station, which I suspect Christian radio probably plays by very similar rules. And what we had is we had a primary playlist of top 40. And those songs got played probably 3 to 4 times more frequent, like with our auto DJ, especially, right? If there wasn't a live DJ and it was just a computer throwing songs on, they got played 3 to 4 times more frequently. When we had talk shows mostly, if a host was doing a talk show and they had 3 songs, 2 of them had to be from that list. Okay. So maybe Ben's right, avoid that list of, quote unquote top 40, the songs that are played 3 to 4 times an hour. You're probably right. But like the rest of the songs are current but not in that primary playlist. I don't know how you can tell that unless you also listen to Christian radio ad nauseum, but um,
No, my wife does, and I'm in the car with her just enough that I know what songs are popular, and um, they already annoy me, and I'm not even in her car that often. But um,
like I said, you just need to listen to some alt radio, Ben. Get some Stacy's Mom.
dude, I absolutely listen to alt radio. I was listening to the remix of Numb on the way here from my last appointment
Oh,
with Jay Z. Yeah, right. That
we
brings back some feels.
so
Um,
for anyone, if you are ever going to suggest a radio station to me, if they have never played Stacy's Mom by Fountains of Wayne live on the air, well, recorded on the air, it is not a radio station. That is my single qualifier. Ever since 103.7 The Shark in South Florida, I listened to it, and the first time I turned it on, I heard Stacy's Mom on the radio, and I was like, no way did they just play Stacy's Mom on the radio. But sure enough, they did. And ever since then, I can't listen to a radio station that's not willing to do that. So don't you dare come and tell me to
we can
listen to
con-
some
we can
classic rock nonsense that won't play Stacy's Mom. If you've never heard
we'll
Stacy's
continue our
Mom,
psychoanalysis later. Don't listen to it.
what? No, do listen. It's a great song. It's a high quality song.
It's an absolute earworm, and it's a wonderful piece of music, but it's not.
It's gonna be stuck in my head the rest
It's
of the
not what
day.
we
By
should
the
be.
way,
Absolutely will. Let me finish my thought here, though. I think part of what makes a lot of old worship songs so cringe is the musicality of them. If you try to play them the way that they were played when they were released, if they were released 20 years ago, ooh, it's gonna be rough. But if you set it in a way that like fits your context and doesn't sound like it was written 25 years ago necessarily,
right?
you
If
can
it
make
was
that
written to be
work.
played on a
Like,
tambourine from the '70s, then no, don't do it.
get rid of it, yeah. Well, just get rid of the tambourine and like you'll figure out the rest of it. Um, but like my church for contemporary, our contemporary service is one guy with a guitar because our space doesn't make sense to do much more than that. Like if we added a cajon, we'd probably be okay. Anything beyond that, we'd be pushing the limits of like what would comfortably work in that space. And that, like, you have to change the musicality of almost any worship song to fit that and to fit that space. And like honestly, it makes some of those songs that like are painful to listen to a little bit better because you're not hearing them the way that you always hear them. You're hearing them kind of fresh, and you're actually able to like, oh, that's what the words are, and it's not just like this incessant earworm song that you've heard 40 billion times in the last 2 weeks in the like
Shine Jesus Shine
10
is
minutes
still
that
off limits, no matter what the instrumentation.
yes, shine Jesus, yes. And if any of my vicarage congregation members are listening to this, um tell Pastor Justin that he needs to have Yes and Amen, the song from, I believe it's from their mid 2000s, played, or Jesus is My Friend. Um, either one of those is an absolute uh, just 10 out of 10 piece of work.
Why do I feel like you just lied to me, Ben?
Because there was dripping sarcasm in my voice, Josh.
Oh,
Jesus used sarcasm. I have not come to
Especially
bring
when he was
peace
talking
but
to
a
the Pharisees,
sword.
I think.
Oh yeah. Or like when he's talking to his disciples in the garden, um, uh, right before his arrest, he tells his disciples, um, "Those of you who don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one, because I need to be numbered among sinners." And they like it just goes right over their heads, and they go, "Well, we've already got two. I guess we need to buy more." And he goes, "No, you've already proven my point." Like, if you here's my next cringe. If you think that sarcasm is not Christian, go read the Gospels again.
Okay, so I have a disagreement there.
Uh-oh.
There's a podcast, it's probably the only podcast that I regularly listen to, called Stuff You Should Know. They just like they pick a random topic and they dive into the research and stuff on it. Um, Very interesting. Well, most of it's very interesting. Some of it is not interesting. But they did one on sarcasm, and there is a definition clarification between sarcasm and verbal irony. And sarcasm, by definition, is at someone's expense. Like it's
Fair
with
enough.
the intention to cause verbal harm. Whereas verbal irony is using the same principle, but just kind of non-threateningly. So I would say
Then I will
verbal
retract.
irony. There's nothing wrong with verbal irony. Sarcasm. Yeah, we might have some issues there. Maybe
That's
that's a
fair.
whole nother podcast. Maybe.
That's fair. I'm just gonna leave
Anyway,
that one there. That one seems well enough fleshed out.
um, another cringe clip art.
Oh,
If you have a smiling sun in your presentation, I'm done. I'm done with you.
while we're there, Comic Sans.
Okay. And if you
I've got
are sitting there thinking, what's wrong with clip art? Stop. Talk to a graphic designer, right? And I got a fair number of problems with clip art. One, whenever people throw it in a slideshow, it always has a background that doesn't match the background of the slide, right? You have your stupid smiling sun and a white box around it, and then your blue whatever cool. No, don't. It's so bad. Another issue is it never is like on theme. It's just a bunch of random like pictures, and it's like a collage for grown-ups. It's and what kills me the most is it's like for so many uses of clip art I've seen, and if you're this isn't my congregation, so I'm gonna because and here's why because I do the presentations. And my sermons, they have graphics, but they always match the color and the theme of the presentation, right? I have dabbled in graphic design. Anyway, I was at a congregation at one point, and if you're listening to this and you're from that congregation and you know I'm talking about you, I'm sorry, but this is an opportunity for growth, okay? Where they did their contemporary worship slides. And I swear that whoever, there was a clip art on every single one. Every single slide had a clip art on it. And I'm pretty sure how it got done is the person copied the lyrics from that slide, pasted them into Google, and picked the coolest graphic they saw on the first page. Which, first of all, is a copyright violation, right? You can't just do that. You can't just copy and paste stuff from Google into a presentation. That is technically illegal, right? But it just looks so bad. Like if I see one more picture of Jesus going like this with a bunch of like cosmic art behind him, I'm like, just put the lyrics on there. Come
was
on.
that on a slide for Shine Jesus Shine?
Probably. Oh man.
Can I just continue to riff off of this? Um,
Please
this is
do.
not one I have seen in a long time. but I feel like it kind of bleeds into this same conversation. Um, if you have screens or TVs in your sanctuary and you're using some sort of presentation software, whether it be PowerPoint, Pro Presenter, um, pretty sure that
Proclaim.
church or that what
Proclaim is the best one I've ever seen and used. So if you're looking for
there are
one,
many
there's
others
my
out there.
recommendation.
There are many others out there. But whatever you do, resist the urge to add a slide to slide transition. Anyone under the age of about 35, maybe even 55, will think that it is cheesy, childish, and unprofessional.
Can confirm. Can confirm. If you cannot resist the temptation, keep it as simple. Like a wipe is sometimes acceptable, but if stars start flying across the screen to clear you to the next slide,
Oh.
stop it. The only exception I'll make is if the amount of work you have to put into this is obscene because I looked into doing it. Is like there's some professional presentations where like it'll be the whiteboard and you'll draw one and then the graphic erases and then you draw and you add on. Like that's cool. That's well done. That also takes a just a metric ton of effort, right? You in reality you need a professional graphics designer with professional grade software to put that together well. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, the other exception is if for whatever reason you use, and this would be more for a sermon and less for the whole. Both of these would be more for a sermon and not for really a whole worship service. But the concept of a prezi, where like if you have a related point, it kind of like it follows a line and then you have the related point. Um, those are the exceptions I'll make because those are very well put together professional. Like those are things you'll see um, in like a stockholder kind of like a professional presentation situation. They're very well polished. They look very good. Um, the transitions in PowerPoint are not in that same ballpark, right?
Mhm.
If you're not paying for your transitions, you just ignore them. Don't use them.
I think I thought of one other final uh, exception to this, and that is if you are at the end of your sermon and you want to not draw attention to the fact that you're about to flip to a blank page, if you can do a really, really, really slow, drawn out fade to black, that is acceptable.
Yeah. Well, and here's I wouldn't go as far as cringe on this one, but a related thing that it bothers me a little bit is when you have like a lyric slide or like when you have the last slide of whatever was last in the service and it sits through the transition, right? Especially with contemporary worship, a lot of times there's a transition. Like when we're headed from a Bible reading to the creed, I talk for a little bit to kind of make that transition, to connect the reading to the creed somehow. Um, don't just leave it on the last slide of the reading or the like. Put in a it could be a blank slide, like a black screen. I think it looks pretty nice if you can put like a almost like a title slide, like maybe it's a nice clean slide that has your church's name on it, um, almost like a desktop kind of slide. Uh, but like have that space, that intentional space in there for that transition. Um, yeah. I don't think I would say that's as far as cringe, but it's something that bugs me probably more than it should.
That's fair. I
So
feel like we're starting to run out of steam here, so maybe we should wrap this
I
up.
think we should. um,
Uh, do
what's
we
our
want to
takeaway
try?
for this?
I got something here, Josh. I think a theme that I saw going throughout this whole thing was distractions. And so I think if there is something that is a distraction in your church that takes away from the focus in worship on Christ or the work of Christ as a church or the ability to communicate Christ, in the case of something like your church just being messy or cluttered, deal with it. Like, don't just let it continue to live and subsist. Deal with it, be done, and move on.
Right. And to kind of expand on that just for a second, it's this principle of, yes, you could say, well, they should just overlook it or they should just get over it, right? You can say that all you want, but like they need to be in church. They need to be connected to Jesus. And
Mm-hmm.
if your like laziness at cleaning out the closet is more important than them maybe being connected with the gospel, you need to take a look at your priorities, sir and or madam. Um, anyway,
And or
so
my
my
friend.
takeaway here is, oh man, I think it just completely left my head. I was listening to you too hard. Oh, cheesy Pete's. It's gone. It's totally gone. I have nothing.
That's okay. I think some final prayer thoughts as we're closing out today. Uh, just be praying that, like, let me back up a step. As you consider the things that your church does, whether it be, with your facility, whether it be in worship, whether it be as a community, whether it's with your technology, um, whatever you do, like, be thoughtful and be prayerful about the way you do it. Um, because there is one mission of the church, and that is to be the body of Christ, the hands and feet. Um, and if we're not accomplishing that with everything that we do, we're missing out somewhere. So, yeah.
Um, I actually think my takeaway was going to be something in line with that, right? We say these are cringy things, and you say, "Well, that's just your opinion." Yeah, but we deal like churches. We deal in the realm of perception as much as
Mm-hmm,
we deal in the realm of reality. So if
mm-hmm,
people's impression of your church is it is out of date and out of touch and not grounded, that is creating a barrier to your gospel proclamation.
mm-hmm,
And you can't say, well, their perception is wrong, so like I shouldn't have to change, because the reality is, even if their perception is wrong, you're called to be the bigger person, quote unquote, and deal with it, right? So,
mm-hmm.
um, yeah. Prayer thoughts, just pray that your church isn't super cringy. Yeah, good.
Yeah, that'll
Um,
work. I think
and
with
uh,
that,
and this,
brothers.
to be clear, this is probably part one. This is probably something we'll circle back to the next time one of us has a needs to rant about things in the church that just make us bunch up. So,
Yep.
yeah.
With
Anything
that,
else, Ben?
brothers and sisters, no, that's it. Go in peace. Serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.